The Adult Ballet Studio is a podcast featuring conversations with the empowering voices of the adult ballet community, a world where passion has no limits and dreams can take flight. My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm an adult ballet dancer and your host. Welcome to the studio. Happy Tuesday and Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome back to the Adult Ballet Studio. Just before the holidays, I had a great conversation with the guest that we're hearing from today. And now that we're back, I can't wait to share this conversation with you. Eduardo Vilaro is not only the artistic director and CEO of Ballet Hispánico, but he's been a driving force in the arts, especially the dance world. I was so happy to talk to him. Ballet Hispánico was founded back in 1970 by Tina Ramirez, and the company has spent more than 5 decades celebrating the vibrant diversity of Latino cultures through dance. The company says it's not just about performances, it's also about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and making space for Latino and Latino voices on stages all around the world. Eduardo originally joined the company as a dancer and educator in the 80s after taking a class and being hand-selected by Tina. After spending his next 10-year chapter as founder and artistic director of Luna Negra Dance Theater in Chicago, his career took him back to Ballet Hispánico as artistic director in 2009 and now CEO. Born in Cuba and raised in New York, Eduardo not only shaped the company's contemporary style, but also has expanded its reach. And he's created more than 40 ballets himself. We talked about his career and his approach to carrying Ballet Hispánico's legacy forward. He also shared some of the lessons he learned from Tina, a trailblazer in New York's ballet community, and what it means to be able to connect his community with this art form and tell stories through dance that resonate across generations. He also spoke about why dance is such an important vehicle for Latino artists to honor their heritage and explore their identities. Check out what he had to say. Hi, Eduardo. How are you?
I'm great. I'm about to leave for a month of teaching, adjudicating in Italy, a week and a half there, and then I'm taking a break with my family in Europe. So I'm
That's amazing.
whoa, I've got a lot of things to do.
Yeah, it's always busy right before a trip. There's always so much scrambling, but hopefully you'll get a nice break in Europe. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. I'm a huge fan of Ballet Hispánico and all of the work that you're doing, leading the company. So I can't wait to dive into some of it.
Sure.
All of our listeners are ballet people, so they should all be familiar with you and your work. But I was just curious, for anyone who wants a little bit more information about your background, they know that you're the second artistic director in Ballet Hispánico's history. You're also its CEO, and you were formerly a dancer with the company. So can you talk about some of your history with the company? And, as someone who began with the company as a dancer, how has your kind of personal journey informed the way that you're leading now?
Well, it's really helpful when you have the organization's DNA coursing through your artistic being, right? And that gives you a sense of continuity. It also connects you to certain values and vision-driven ideals for leadership, right? So I worked under the founder. That's another thing. That's another connective tissue I understood why this organization was made and why we continue to do the work we do in honor of that legacy. So that's been really important. I was a dancer back. I joined in 1985, 86. And right before, I was at Adelphi University and their conservatory program, their dance program, which was wonderful. Lots of teachers from Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. We had Cecchetti teachers. It was a very much, in those days, a very conservatory approach to, and young, right? In the 80s, dance programs were just beginning to unfold and really manifest themselves in certain universities. So I was lucky to get that and then bring what I learned here to my artistry. But immediately after I started Ballet Hispánico, the story is, it's not a story, it's true. It goes that I was here I took a class. I was going to graduate in 3 months. I came, I took a class. Tina saw me. She offered me a job then and there. And I'm like, oh, well, no, I have to go back to school. So she called the chair at that, Norman Walker, a very prestigious choreographer at that time. And he said, he's fine. He could go on and start, but he's going to have to finish his academic classes during the evenings. So we started, and I immediately went on tour. And so started my artistry and building up that understanding of what it is to be a professional dancer. Of course, this company is based on classical ballet. That is what we warm up the dancers, that we use that technique. And when I say classical, it's classical contemporary. We're not there. They don't do Wagner up there. Tina founded it this way because it's such an eclectic and diverse organization that it needs that singular hold of technique and understanding of the body to allow a dancer to do multiple. Yes, it also sometimes we have that whole ideal, which has changed now completely these days, that ballet dancers can't do contemporary because so many contemporary choreographers are now working in ballet companies. And so what you're getting is this really remarkable, eclectic dancers being formed that, you could tell on stage, I can anyway, on stage, the importance of classical technique for an eclectic dancer. And so we continue that today from Tina. And it's along with that, the organization was built on flamenco and the use of the torso. And so you have a lot of that in a Ballet Hispánico dancer. Anyway, so that's what I was introduced to when I was here and loved it, and found for a young immigrant child growing up in the States, this was such a belonging moment to be with a Latino dance organization at that point in time. So I quickly became an educator, teaching classes for the company on tour. And Tina gave me some projects to do in which I led. And so Tina was the one who really instigated my entrepreneurship, and that was wonderful. And then I left a decade later, then finished a master's program in Chicago, then built my own organization called Luna Negra Dance Theater. And that skyrocketed into the dance landscape and was going well. And then a decade into that, building that, actually 15 years, Tina stepped down and I was asked to come in and take over.
What an incredible full circle moment to, have started by taking a class, get noticed by Tina, who's an incredible woman. I definitely want to talk about her later as well and her legacy. And then to have kind of gone off and built your own career and come back in this way of her personally asking you to step into the role of artistic director and now CEO.
Yeah, it's surreal.
Yeah, it is. It's such an inspiring story. And I'm glad that you gave us that whole story and background, because that touches on a lot of the questions I want to ask. And I know that you mentioned some of your personal background. You were born in Cuba and moved to New York at the age of 6. So can you talk a little bit about how that background and journey kind of shaped your approach to dance and your work?
Wow. In Cuba, you're born dancing. I mean, the rhythms that are still alive today and have just immersed the whole planet in Caribbean music. When you think of the legacy of African rhythms infused in the Caribbean and where that touches even today with reggaeton and all of those, even rap, it's remarkable. It's quite remarkable. And so I say that only because, mom at an early age, come on, get up and dance. You have to learn how to dance. And so we danced at parties. We danced at, the music was so important. And I think that I just want to underline that, how important music led me to, because I think we forget how important music is for dance, period, and what it inspires in you. Doesn't mean you have to make a dance to music, but it is such a source of inspiration for us as dancers. So I was inspired immediately. I was one of those kids that performed for the parents, all that good stuff. But I really didn't get into it until the 8th grade, when I was part of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, a musical.
I love that.
Yeah, I was Linus, and Linus had a dance solo music, full-on musical theater. And I did it, and, the connection to the audience at that young age, I felt at home. And so from then, it grew. There you go. Music, connection to community, and just love of performing.
I love that so much. And I connect with that story too, because I got into dance, seeing a local production of Annie at a young age and thinking, I want to be up there. I want to be doing, what they do. And so I love that musical theater introduction to a love for the performing arts makes me happy. And I know that, so you mentioned some of the musical influences and, Ballet Hispánico is a company of such strong and versatile dancers. As you said, there are influences from Latin music as well as, contemporary and classical ballet movements. And it says on the company's website that you've sort of infused this legacy with contemporary dance to kind of reflect America's changing cultural landscape. And I was wondering if you could dig into that a little bit and how that approach is kind of reflecting the environment of America today and also furthering the company's legacy.
Thank you for that question. I think it's such an important question because, all of us, Latino, Italian, every immigrant that comes here holds on to their culture, of course, and then develops a whole new way of being. And so you become something else. And in that world of in the middle, right? You're not, you're part American, you're part this. There's this new being, I feel, and these new traditions that come up. Right. And so I think that's very important because it's an evolution because of the being extracted from homeland. And then it adds to the way someone thinks. How do you balance that? How do you create? And I think that it is so important for Ballet Hispánico not to sit in folklore or not to sit in what we left behind because we're here, we're Latino Americanos. And so how do you develop that vision so that everyone sees the essences of who you are culturally, but then says, but that's 100% American? Because when you go back home, you are called an American. You are seen as American. It's a different because you're out of place, right? So there's nothing more than a dancer choreographer understands of taking their place and developing beautiful imagery to show who they are now. And so that's what I'm always looking for in a choreographer. What are you thinking about culture now? Who are you to this culture? What are the narratives that you want to bring up? And then bring it in a contemporary way, because we cannot sit in iconic representation, nor can we sit in stereotype, because then we don't add to the cultural dialogue. We don't add to the awareness that this country is so much fuller, that it is not monocentric, that it is a mixture of so many different people from Europe and Latin America and Africa and on and on. It's such a beautiful thing. And that's why we center a very contemporary look at how the Latina culture evolves.
I think that's such an important approach. And it leads into one of my next questions, because I know sometimes in politics or art or just the news, Latinos are portrayed as this monolith, when in reality, there are so many diverse cultures, traditions, and people, within that community. So can you talk about how Ballet Hispánico's work seeks to sort of represent the multifaceted nature of the Latino community?
It's the body. First of all, the body is politicized. So we're stepping into an art form that politicizes in how we look, how we see, how we dress, what we do. But I don't sit in the politics of the day. I sit in how do we represent in fullness. And so we use our music. We use some traditions to develop narratives. And I think that, again, not only is the body politicized, but our art is always, what does that mean? Because it lives in this other area of our brain that is not linear. And so that's another part of our art form that's very important, to be able to make someone go, what? So when folks leave a performance and say, well, I didn't get that. And it's like, sit down and think about it. And so again, and of course, I'm going to say this because I'm an artist and I want to promote this art form. We are at a time that we need to be in a room together, thinking hard about what we're seeing as a collective, energizing us to think like collectives instead of living in these siloed worlds like we do with our computers. There's a place and time for that also. So it's important for us to continue to push live performance, because in a live performance, you have to commune in such an interesting, different way that is based on energy, emotion, visual imagery, creativity. And I'm hoping that we don't ever lose that, because then we can't explain what you just asked earlier. Why is it important to show the diversity in not only the Latina culture, but in our world?
I think that's so true. And I hope it's something we don't lose as well. Live performances are so important. And as you've spoken about before, dance is a language without words. So it's a way of connecting with people on such an intimate level. It's such a deep connection between the performers and the audience. And I think it's so important in starting some of these dialogues, as you said. And I know that you mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation, but community is a big focus for the company as well. And one program that sort of furthers this mission is the return of the En Familia matinees next year, where all the seats in the house are $25 with fees. I love this program. So could you talk about that and, what inspired Ballet Hispánico to create a program specifically for families and young audiences? And, what do you hope that they get out of it?
So Ballet Hispánico was founded on access for the community. And for me, access means education, and it did so for Tina as well. And so we've always, while our heart is what we do here at Ballet Hispánico, our backbone is education and training and giving opportunity. And so this is just an extension of that, and understanding how difficult in today's world it is. Everyone wants the Latino community or to come and sit and be part. Well, an access point is money, is how much tickets cost. And how do we break that kind of hierarchy of those who have being able to go and those who don't? And so for a family in my community to bring 2 parents and 3 kids at a regular, it's unattainable. And then you have to come in and you've got dinner or you've got lunch and you have to think about travel and all that. So we focused on how do we make it more accessible, and that is tickets. So you come in and you can bring your whole family, and it doesn't necessarily break the bank. And then what I love about our En Familia program is that it is an education program, and it is a program that invites you to see dance if you've never understood it. And so we continue to build that church of access, right? And so you'll see full pieces. I come out and I introduce. I have fun with the audience. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's interactive. We talk about culture, a journey through Latinidad and what that means. And by the end, the whole audience is doing merengue or salsa, right? And they've had this visceral experience instead of just sitting there and also they get up. And so I think it's important to continue to develop ways of connecting new audiences if we're really seeing that audiences are not coming back after the pandemic. We have to open up ways for them to come back.
That's so important. And I love that you described it as a church of access, because having that access is sacred. It's so needed in the arts. And you talked about some of the interactive components. I love this as well. You do movement exercises, audience participation. So I'm curious as well how this program is sort of helping young audiences connect with their own heritage. And what do you hope children or, young dancers might take away from attending?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I am so lucky because I get to see the work manifest in young people. And like En Familia, even when we're on tour, to have a young person see themselves reflected on stage in an art form that they thought was not for them, to have a family come back, stay back after the performance and wait for you and say, thank you. That's it. I saw myself. My kids they heard their language, they heard their music, but at the same time, they heard themselves as Americans. It's just invaluable and something that I just adore about this organization, how we are so inclusive for everyone to find themselves.
It is invaluable, and I love that because it goes back to what you talked about at the beginning, being in the Charlie Brown musical and finding that sense of belonging. That's what you're
Yes.
doing now, paying it forward to these young audiences, which is amazing. And another program that's also doing this that I'm really excited to talk about is the Instituto Coreográfico, which celebrated its 10-year anniversary in 2024. So congrats on that milestone. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that program and some of the work that it does as well.
So when I was here as a dancer, I was very saddened because there were no Latina choreographers. There were very few, and a handful, I could tell you from my time here, that I worked with. And I was like, okay, and then if I ask someone who's even in the dance world, so who are the top 5 Latina choreographers, they're going to get stumped. And I needed to change that. I was like, okay, no. We need to change that. How do you do it? You do it with a lab that helps emerging choreographers. You invite people to think that they can be choreographers. You give access. So it's 2 weeks of working with the professional company. And that's something. These are dancers that can take whatever movement language and reproduce it and work and be creative. Very different for a young emerging choreographer trying to scrap and find dancers as much as they can. And it's always a hodgepodge. I remember I did it. Hodgepodge and the level and all that. This is set. Studio, space, time, energy we give them, right? Everything a choreographer needs. The whole building is for them. We have mentorships. They get a mentor to work with. They have a videographer, young videographer, because I'm very interested in continuing to develop dance filmmakers that understand the dance process and the creative process. They get a mentor as well. There's time to be in the studio, and then we get to show the process and talk about it to our audiences. So again, we invite audiences for another point of access to how a choreographer is thinking about creation. And in particular, these choreographers who are thinking about their culture as well. Then by the end, we have that showing. Sometimes the choreographers come back and do a full work. It all depends on if it works. Sometimes they don't. But what they do leave is with reels, video reels of them creating so they could send it to theaters or applications for grants. They leave with more tools for their tool belt in developing as artists.
This is such a cool program. I'm really excited to talk to you about this. I know that Matthew Neenan was appointed as the choreographer for fall 2024. How does the program kind of go about selecting choreographers? Is it an application process? Are they invited, or how does that all work?
So, we did it both ways, and it works best when I invite, because there are themes that occur for our organization that are necessary. So Matthew came in non-Latino, but he's interested in working with a Latino-specific music, which is tango. And Matthew is a master musical choreographer. I mean, the way he listens to music is just remarkable. And so I wanted that to give another. We have to give fullness. Again, inclusion, not exclusion. To give fullness of how someone who's not Latino might be listening to that music and how it takes over their thought process.
Right. And I know you mentioned, obviously, the program emphasizes cultural identity. And I'm curious, how you encourage and work with the choreographers to explore their own heritage. And what are some of the challenges that they might face in doing this? How do you kind of encourage them to work through those?
A lot of it is that sometimes these Latino choreographers don't have the space to talk about those things. And so once they get in here, your shell just melts away and you're around people who are interested in this conversation. So there is that feeling of I have not only the right, but I have the go ahead to be free to speak about certain topics about my culture. So I have a lot of conversation with the artists, their mentors. It's an open conversation with the audience, small, but very freeing, and not always possible in other spaces.
Yeah, and to be able to have that space where you're just free to be yourself, to explore your identity, I think is so important because you're giving people space to do that. And I can imagine that it unlocks so much creativity that maybe you haven't been able to access before, which is really cool. And the audience collaboration. I mean, I could talk all day about this program, but essentially, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that's what we do. Look at Annabelle Lopez Ochoa.
Yes.
Love her. We're good friends, and also I love her work. We have
amazing
works from her. She never thought of herself as Latina until the day we sat down and I invited her to do a work for my company in Chicago. And I'm like, but girl, you're Colombian. You're part Colombian. Let's talk about that. And it's so freeing. Even though it was one small part, I know being able to talk about it finally freed her. And now she's done all these Frida and all these Latina-focused women ballets that she is. So it might not have changed her process, but it opened something in her. And that's what Ballet Hispánico is about. Even if you're not Latino, we open curiosity.
Yes. You're encouraging curiosity. And you mentioned Frida. That's an incredible ballet. Someone recommended that I see it. And I want more ballets like that in the world.
You should see, what she did for us, which is the Evita Perón story, was unbelievable, incredible.
Well, amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. She's incredible. And, essentially what this program is doing is building the next generation of leaders and innovators in the dance world. And I know that Ballet Hispánico's founder, Tina Ramirez, was an innovator in her own right. She had an incredible legacy. She passed a few years ago, and what a tremendous loss for the dance community, but just the resonance of her impact is still felt. So I was wondering if you could talk about some of the ways that she broke barriers for Latin artists in the dance world, and how you're focusing on kind of building upon her legacy.
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. So Tina broke the glass ceiling in terms of she was a Latina woman at the end of our cultural wars at that time, civil rights movement and everything. First of all, a woman in New York City building an organization when around her were all men. Balanchine, Ailey, DTH, Arthur Mitchell. All of these ballet companies had established themselves through male, dominated by that. And here she was, this woman. There were single choreographers, Twyla and all, they were, but as in terms of forming a company like that, that's repertory, that's glass ceiling, right? That's to begin with, that's that. And then her amazing ability to bring people around and develop her organization is still something that I value and I think about a lot. I learned a lot watching her. And, we all have things that take what you can and leave the rest, right? There are some things that maybe things that she did that don't work for me now. That's fine. That's how we learn. But certainly what her legacy continues to leave is this opportunity for young Latina choreographers, dancers, students to find themselves in their own space.
And as you mentioned, she opened so many doors. And I'm curious as well, are there any contemporary issues that you see now for Latino dancers and choreographers today that differ from when the company was founded by Tina? And how do you hope to kind of expand upon her work and address some of these modern challenges?
Yeah, well, the thing is that at that time, people saw Latinos as very one thing, right? Boxed. And so my task is to continue to push the awareness of the multiplicity of diasporas, traditions that make the Latino world Latino, because again, we are not a monolith. But I think that the difference now, as opposed to Tina, is how to capture that. Because at Tina's time, it was very much, the suave male, the very gorgeous Latinas and dance nightclubs and tango and this and that. That was big in our world, right? And how we saw, if not, then there were the bad sides. You were either the maid or this, and you could never be the prince or the princess. But that's changed so much since that time. And I think what my job is now that we are in all those roles, now that we can, how do we still hold on to and celebrate why being Latino makes us so special or gives us certain special qualities?
That's such incredible work that you're doing to further her legacy. And I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to take some time to talk about the adult program at Ballet Hispánico, because, this podcast, The Adult Ballet Studio, most of the audience is amateur adult dancers who sort of came back to ballet or discovered it later in life. So I know that you do such great work in this space for that community. And it says on Ballet Hispánico's website for its adult program, come as you are, dance as you wish, which I love. So could you talk a little bit about that program and how it sort of reflects the company's commitment to inclusion and creating a sense of community?
Well, again, it's the company's main value, how to include everyone, how to invite everyone into dance. And we do so. We have all these classes and we welcome, from all our student body, we have there are some kids, they're not going to be trainees. We have encuentros, and that's a program for just students who are interested in just the joy of dance. For adults, it's the same thing. Try something. We have a tango class. There's a classical ballet class. There is a contemporary. Sometimes we bring in special Afro-Latino classes like salsa or Afro-Cuban. And so it's allowing the adult world come into this mixture that we have that makes us who we are as Ballet Hispánico.
I love that you have this program and you have, access points for everyone and, however they want to engage with ballet. I know that ballet has been sort of, as we talked about, a very exclusive space historically, and it's wonderful to see how things are opening up. I know that there's still, a lot of work to do. So what would you say to anyone who's feeling sort of, on the outside, or like there's not space for them in ballet? How can they kind of find their place, or how can we as a ballet community listen more and create, more welcoming spaces?
Oh, those are two very different questions, right? But I'll try.
They are.
Yeah, I mean, look, we still have a lot of work to do. Ballet is tough. First of all, it's expensive for families. So could you imagine? I mean, my parents could never. I got myself through some of that training. So how do we do that? And I think that dance companies all over our country are really taking a hard look and developing ways ways that we've been using for many years, right? They've had to look at their values, the body, how do we create dancers, how is it more diverse. And I think it's really changing things in the dance world, and it's important to do that because we've got to be aware that this art form evolves because it is of the body. We're evolving, and so not only mentally and culturally, but that part of giving it over to community is so important because that community, and I'm not talking just about finances here, that community turns into support, right? Again, let's use the analogy of a church. You're building your church even more. And you're going to need that support. You're going to need that community to see this is an important arts organization because you never know what can happen politically and what's taken away or what's given. And so the community is your first real partner in keeping an organization such a dance company alive.
I love that answer. Yeah, a community is a collaborator, in a way. And because communities are dynamic, it's, as you said, so important for the art form to continue to evolve in order to engage. And, we've talked about so much. I could ask you a million more questions, but is there anything, coming up for Ballet Hispánico that we didn't talk about that you want listeners to be aware of?
Well, I just want to invite the listeners to come see us wherever they are, on our website. We have a touring schedule. If we're in your town, we'd love to see you. And then, if you're in New York in the spring, May 29th, we open our Carmen Maquia, which is our story of another beloved Latina icon, Carmen, by choreographer Gustavo Ramirez Sansano from Valencia. It's a beautiful work. And so I invite you to come to my house.
I can't wait to come see that show, and hopefully a lot of our listeners will check it out as well. I'll include a link to the website in our show notes. And if you're up for it, we have one last section on the podcast. It's called Petit Allegro. It's just some fun, quick questions, if you're okay with it.
Yes, I love Petit Allegro.
So what's one thing that you always have to have in your dance bag at every class or rehearsal?
My goodness, just one? I think for me, water.
Water is so important. That's a popular answer, and with good reason.
Yeah, water and a towel. I'm one of the sweaters.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? You're working so hard in the studio. So is there a style of dance that you haven't tried but have always wanted to?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Oh gosh. I've tried so many. Oh my God, I'd love to try Irish and step dancing. I mean, I think it's remarkable, but I've never done it's so foreign to me. So I'd like to try that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I took one class. It was so hard for me. I thought I would be good at it because of all the quick footwork. It was so different from ballet, but it's an incredible art form.
And you always try to do something that teaches you something, right? Something else.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is one of my favorite questions to ask anyone who's, danced with a company professionally. Do you have any funny backstage stories or memories that you can share?
Personal backstage.
Yes.
I've got so many. My goodness. Watching, sometimes funny things happen. And so someone slips or something, so someone made a funny with their bodies on stage. And we're all doing a lift. Right. And I'm in my full lift arabesque, and I see across, and my mirrored partner, she's cracking up in arabesque, like literally shaking. And then she pees on this man's arm.
No.
One of those laughers. And so then the whole core, we're just cracking up, dying, trying to figure out how we're going to make this happen because everyone is cracking up. I won't say when it happened or what was the work, but it was so funny.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's one of those, the show must go on, but how? We're all laughing.
So I'm not saying any names, but yeah, things like that happen.
That's great. I love these stories. And then if you could describe Ballet Hispánico in one word, what would it be?
Joy.
Joy. I love that. It's so true. And then the last question I always ask everyone who comes on is, in a perfect world, what would the ballet world or the dance world look like?
Wow, because I do think that the dance world, even we just need to fix the female leadership issue. We need, in a perfect world, we'd have more females running dance organizations and dance companies. And we still have, it's getting better. But that's it, because I see companies, we are a diverse group, even in the ballet world, right? And it's getting even better. But I think we're headed in such the right way. And now it's just that leadership, that shift in leaders and how we see it. I'm one Latino. We should have many more. I mean, there are other companies run by women, but they're small. We need the bigger companies to really set the standard of how we need to look.
Yeah, I really hope for that. We need more Eduardos. We need more Tinas. We need more, people who are doing such great work just like you. And so thank you for all the work you're doing to further, ballet and make it accessible. And, anyone listening, if they want to connect with you, where can they find you on social media or on the website?
Yes, you can find me. My handle is Vilaro on social media, or ballethispanico.org for our website.
That's great. Well, I'll include links to those in our show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a busy schedule. It's the end of the year.
But absolutely a pleasure, Elizabeth. It was lovely speaking to you, and your questions were just wonderful. So thank you.
I was so happy to share this interview with you. I loved talking to Eduardo and learning more about Ballet Hispánico's incredible work. The company's 2025 performances begin with, as Eduardo mentioned, Carmen Maquia at New York City Center from May 29th through June 1st in celebration of the 150th anniversary of the beloved classic ballet Carmen. Tickets are available through the New York City Center website, and there's a link in the show notes as well as links to Ballet Hispánico's website and social media if you want to learn more. Thank you so much to Eduardo for taking the time to speak with me, and to all of you for tuning in for the Adult Ballet Studio's first episode of 2025. Send me a message and let me know what your dance resolutions are for this year. I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at the Adult Ballet Studio at gmail.com or on social media at eBlossfield. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and leaving a rating and review of this podcast on your platform of choice. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast in the new year and helping it continue to grow. There's no mid-month episode this month, so stay tuned for our next episode on Tuesday, February 4th. And in the meantime, happy dancing, everybody, and see you at the bar.